Namaste, aloha. Welcome to tonight's class, the yoga wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. My name is Janapati Das, and I am happy to be here with you today. Thank you. Please accept my respects, and thank you so much for tuning in and giving me the opportunity to share this most wonderful wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is translated by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, my spiritual grandfather, who is the spiritual master of my spiritual master, Jagat Guru, Siddhaswarapananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, my dear Guru Dev, who taught me everything I know about the Bhagavad Gita and the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. So I offer my most humble obeisances to him and to A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who came to the Western world and preached the Bhagavad Gita, the message of the Bhagavad Gita, to the Western us heathen, low life, even though so many of his god brothers felt that they shouldn't spend time wasting on Americans and Europeans teaching them about yoga wisdom. His dear Guru Dev Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had instructed him to please bring the message of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna to the Western countries, and he took that at heart. At the ripe age of in his 70s, left to the United States and by the mercy of Krishna, we all know about this. So I'm eternally grateful to Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for bringing this message to us, and with which I would never have met my dear spiritual master. So please accept my respects, and as we are going to get into this tonight, so what we're going to do first, of course, is the hearing and repeating of Krishna's names, which is the prime benediction, as laid out by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the most holy prime benediction and means of self-realization and meditation in this day and age, which is the hearing and repeating of Krishna's most holy names. So please join with me in chanting Kirtan. Namo Sila Swarupananda Amahamsa Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Prasthayate Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Kora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Prasthayate Advaita Gadadara Shivasadeva Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur 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 Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur Haribo Nitai Gaur Nitai Gaur Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Haribol. So thank you for tuning in tonight. Haribol Yolanda, nice to see you. So, we are reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is. If you are unfamiliar with this terminology, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad comes from the Sanskrit word Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of God, Sri Krishna. And Gita is the song. Tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the difference between devotional service to Krishna, which is what the Bhagavad Gita is. In fact, this is, the book itself says Bhagavad Gita as it is. And yet, so many commentators, so many people want to inject their own interpretation into the Bhagavad Gita. You know, Krishna is a very important historical figure, or it's really about the impersonal feature of God, and Krishna is manifested as that. I mean, there are so many types of philosophy, but actually the Bhagavad Gita is the song of God, the song of Krishna. It's about Krishna. Everything in the Bhagavad Gita is about Krishna and about surrender to Krishna. And as it is said in the very end of the Bhagavad Gita, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I will give you all protection from sinful reactions. Do not fear. Right? That is the sum bonum of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Just surrendering to Krishna. Just understanding that there is a supreme person, a lovable supreme person that we have an eternal relationship with. Krishna makes very clear in the story, if you're familiar, of course, with it, is this conversation between his dear disciple and friend Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield. And Arjuna has a dilemma, and Krishna lays out the science of God, the song of God, this philosophy, not just a philosophy, but this life, as it is described in one of the verses I'll read tonight, an imperishable path. Bhaktivedanta refers to it as the religion of eternal engagement. So this path is not perishable. The path to Krishna, our relationship with Krishna, is not perishable. It's not just something that kind of comes into being and then disappears. It's an eternal, ever-existing relationship that has to do with a real person. So I'm going to read some of the verses, and also I want to start with the beginning introduction. If you don't have this, I recommend buying it and make sure you get the right Bhagavad Gita. Like I said, there are many translations out there. You don't want to get the ones that are wrong. So in the introduction, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada says, Bhagavad Gita is also known as Gita Upanishad. Right? It is the essence of Vedic knowledge and one of the most important Upanishads in Vedic literatures. Of course, there are many commentaries in English on the Bhagavad Gita, and one may question the necessity for another one. This present edition can be explained in the following way. Recently, an American lady asked me to recommend an English translation of Bhagavad Gita. And of course, in America, there are so many editions of Bhagavad Gita available in English. But as far as I have seen, not only in America, but also in India, none of them can strictly be said to be authoritative. Because in almost every one of them, the commentator has expressed his own opinions without touching the spirit of Bhagavad Gita as it is. So this is this problem, of course. You know, somebody learns how to translate Sanskrit, and they're a so-called scholar, and they're translating the Bhagavad Gita how they see it, right? Even in the impersonal yogic path, there's so many Mayavadi philosophers who try to translate that, and many of the so-called gurus in this path have actually not been able to go very far in translating. They don't go very far because it becomes very clear and very problematic, as Krishna even says, and I'll read some of the verses in chapter 12 entitled Devotional Service that shows that it is problematic. It's problematic because you come to this point where you're like, it says over and over and over again that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they don't like that because they see themselves as Krishna, as the Supreme Person, and that we're all, this is the impersonal thought that there is this monism, that there is no differentiation or variegatedness between different living entities and the Supreme. So, I'll read a little bit more. The spirit of Bhagavad Gita is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita itself. It is just like this. If we want to take a particular medicine, then we have to follow the directions written on the label. We cannot take the medicine according to our own whim or the direction of a friend. It must be taken according to the directions on the label or the directions given by a physician. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita should be taken or accepted as it is, directed by the speaker himself. The speaker of the Bhagavad Gita is Lord Sri Krishna. He is mentioned on every page of Bhagavad Gita as a Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Of course, the word Bhagavan sometimes refers to any powerful person or any powerful demigod, and certainly here Bhagavan designates Lord Sri Krishna as a great personality, but at the same time, we should know that Lord Sri Krishna is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, as confirmed by all great acharyas, spiritual masters, and they list even the founder of impersonal Mayavadi philosophy, Shankaracharya, who was an incarnation of Lord Shiva, as a long backstory as to why he was teaching this impersonal philosophy. But even he, at the time of his death, acknowledged that Narayan or Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here they put him in here, even though he taught most of his life this monism philosophy of one, all is one. Ramanujacharya, Madhavacharya, Nimbarka Swami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and many other authorities of Vedic knowledge in India. So these are all people that have designated Krishna, of course, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a little bit there. We're going to go into chapter 12, actually. And primarily we're going to read a few verses, but we want to, if you've read this chapter 12, it's a really wonderful, they're all wonderful, but it's very important to understand the premise of the Bhagavad Gita is in a situation where one person is inquiring about spiritual matters from an authority, in this case Arjuna, who was a great warrior, who was a great devotee of Krishna, who is extremely knowledgeable about the Vedic civilization, and if you read it in the first chapter, he lays out all the reasons why he doesn't want to fight in the battlefield. But he has this dilemma, and he puts himself in a position to receive knowledge. And this is what is referred to the difference between this sort of Jnana, what is termed as Jnana Yoga, or the ability, this impersonal, this pursuit of monism, or pursuit of the Brahman, or Brahma Jyoti, white light merging of the spirit soul with the Brahma Jyoti, or the effulgence of Krishna. That's another backstory, so maybe I should refer to that a little bit before the understanding of the three terms of God realization as understood by the great acharyas. So it's threefold. Okay, the lowest form of God realization is known as Brahman realization. Brahman realization is understanding the impersonal, which is this sort of impersonal white light, great energy, ocean of energy, understanding it's the lowest form because it is the effulgence which comes from Bhagavan, right? So, but this is what many people in religion and Native American, or they think of this great white light, or sometimes people have talked about even psychedelic experiences of seeing a white light, and this is what we're referring to in the unmanifested white light, the energy of coming off of the body of Sri Krishna. So this is Brahman realization. It's what many yogis strive for. Many people in the yogic process will strive for, to merge, to launch their themselves as a spirit soul. They understand Aham Brahmasmi. They understand the beginning of this Bhagavad Gita as I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am actually spirit, but they don't know beyond that. They think, well, the purpose of I have to sit in yogic postures and do certain breathing practices and means to launch myself out through the Sushumna, or the out through the top of the head, into this great white light. And so yogis, it's a very difficult process to do, and but in previous ages it was much easier to do. So people try to strive for this, and when they do, there is an undifferentiated oneness, because you're sort of annihilation, temporary annihilation in this great white light of different spirit souls, and your identity is temporarily nullified. So but you eventually have to come down back into the material body after being in this state. What happens a lot of times is people think because they're descending, they think they are descending from the oneness, and they are that. They are that. They are realized, and they go on to be impersonal Mayavadi philosophers or gurus, and they teach that I am God, you are God, but you don't remember your God, and it's my job to teach you you are God. And anyway, this is a very problematic. There's, as we get into this. So Arjuna, the point being is Arjuna is actually in a situation where he's asking intelligent questions, and a lot of questions, it's wondering if he already knows that, but he's actually setting it an example for future generations to be able to look at that. And also for those people that try to translate the Bhagavad Gita from this sort of impersonalistic view, it's clearly stated in this chapter. That's why it says Bhagavad Gita as it is, because it is. There is nothing to interpret. It's right there in the Bhagavad Gita as it is, explaining that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This path of bhakti, or devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is a better path than to try to merge into this white light. And so this question Arjuna is humbly asking, just to make it very clear for people to understand that, right? That, okay, there is this white light, this is Brahman realization, people who understand that. But above that, and a higher realization, is Paramatma realization, which is the expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead into the hearts of all living entities. Sometimes people think of that as, the Holy Spirit, or the Lord in my heart, and people can pray to Krishna, because Krishna is in your heart. And in past ages, many yogis would go out to the forest to meditate on their heart and on their breathing, to focus on the Lord in their heart. So and then they would achieve Paramatma realization. But that is also very difficult to do these days. You can't go out to the forest, you get bugged by mosquitoes, and people are just like, so fetished in Starbucks and things like that. They're like, oh, I want some coffee. They can't handle being out in the forest, sitting on a loincloth, in the middle of freezing water or something. So, but Bhagavan realization is easily attained in this age by the hearing and repeating of Krishna's names, as laid out by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Arjuna course, Bhagavan is the highest realization, and he poses this question to Krishna in this chapter where he says, Arjuna inquired, which is considered to be more perfect, those who are properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? So this is actually a question that he's putting out there. Which is better? Which is better? Is it better to do these practices, to think of, monism as I am God, and I've forgotten, but if I do these certain meditations, then I will also realize that I am God, and I won't need my guru anymore, and I won't need to do any practices. I'll just be self-realized as God. Or is it better to understand that actually, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita very clearly, Aham Brahmasmi, we are not our body, we are not our minds, we are spiritual entities eternally. It describes it very clearly in chapter 2 as the spirit soul being dazzling, and that sometimes people see it as so wonderful, and sometimes they cannot even understand it at all. You tell people, you're not your body, you're not your mind. For those of us who've been practicing meditation, we've gone over this philosophy, and that's sort of a very stable philosophy. You are not your body, you are not your mind, and it's in the Bhagavad Gita. But it's a really, actually quite radical concept, especially when you approach people and say, hey, you're not your body, you're not white, you're not black, you're not tall, you're not short, you're not fat, you're not old, you're not tall, you're not identifying as this kind of thing. These are all designations. You're not a male, you're not an American, you're not a Russian, you're not a Ukrainian, you're not an Israeli or a Palestinian. You are a spirit soul, temporarily in a body, living out this life, very short particular life, one of probably multitude millions, right? And it's also stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 13, as the embodied soul, the soul in the body, right? Embodied soul continually passes through the body from the birth, youth, to middle age, to old age, and it similarly will pass into another body at the time of death. And that the sober person or the self-realized person will understand this and is not affected by this change. So that's a very basic class of who we are, right? It's like who we are. And so Krishna here is going to tell Arjuna that so he says here in the next chapter, in chapter 12, text 2, the Blessed Lord says, he whose mind is fixed on my personal form, right, always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith is considered by me to be most perfect. And so he goes on, there's a lot to this chapter, right? And that is very important to understand that it's a better situation, this idea that all paths lead to the same goal is not true, and that's a very simple concept to know. If you're going to be following, there are many, many, many kinds of paths, as my spiritual teacher had said, that, your bhakti yoga, the devotion to Krishna, is so high that you can sometimes see these other kinds of paths, whether, okay, I'm doing this yoga asanas, they're on these ladders way, way down, they're like, hey, come do this, or hey, come do that, or hey, some astral travel, that's kind of fun, let's do some lucid dreaming. They're way down there, and some of these paths may lead to a certain destination in a short time. And what Bhaktivedanta lays out here is that it's okay, people in understanding the impersonal Brahman realization, they if they don't have a spiritual master that's teaching them about devotional service or bhakti yoga or the practice of sadhana bhakti, which is the regulated principles of bhakti yoga applied and practiced, then the impersonal feature, the impersonal philosophy, the cultivation of knowledge of Aham Brahmasmi, I'm not my body, I'm the spirit, is a good step. It's like going up that ladder, right? And usually what it will do is if they're guided properly, they'll find their way to the rung of bhakti yoga or sadhana bhakti. And so that's what I was saying, is that, if you take the direct flight from Honolulu to San Francisco, there's a direct flight. The practice of sadhana bhakti, Krishna makes very clear that the perfect example of what is superior is devotion to Krishna, right? That is the direct flight. That practice as laid out by your spiritual master. These are the things that you need to do. Chant Krishna's names on beads and chanting, read scripture. There's so many kinds of things, right, that you can do. These are very direct as laid out by the pure devotee of Krishna to practice, and that is a direct flight that will lead you to Krishna. Now, if you're going to go on a flight that's going to Tokyo, you're not going to go to San Francisco. So not all paths go the same way. So this sort of quasi New Age sort of concept of like, well, I can just do whatever, and yes, it's kind of true in the sense that, like I said, you could be going one way and then you find yourself, okay, if I go to Tokyo, and I realize, I got to get on the flight that goes to San Francisco. Yeah, you'll get to San Francisco eventually, but it's a more direct flight to go to San Francisco from Honolulu direct, right? So you may be practicing something and you're cultivating all these kinds of things on the lower rungs that my spiritual teacher was talking about. It leads you to a point of like, okay, now I realize this is a much superior and direct path, right? So, because you're doing it with sincerity. And it's understood that in any religious practice, a person who is cultivating sincerity in the practice will be spiritually elevated. And then maybe their next life they come to a point where they're doing something where they're on the right path, right? So the imperishable path. So, which is a very direct path, of course. So if you look at the idea of religion, the religious paths, and this is why Krishna says, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me, because the religious paths are full of all kinds of regulations. Even the Vedic system had all kinds of, types of rules and regulations for certain situations, and people who wanted to, okay, I want to have this much sense enjoyment, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and but I want to do it in a regulated sort of way. And that's kind of that's really what religion is this regulation. Okay, we're going to keep it contained. We're going to try to direct you towards the imperishable path of bhakti, which is love for God. And this can all be understood from the great thinkers of the faiths that have come along. So primarily, one great saint, and of course, is Lord Jesus Christ, who said, my first and foremost commandment is that you love God with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole being, and like unto it, you love your neighbor as yourself. So this idea of bhakti is already in the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ. Lord Jesus Christ was a bhakta. He was a lover, a dear devotee of Krishna, of God. And he in his teachings, that's exactly what he was teaching. But if you kind of look at a religion like Christianity or any other kind of Islam or whatever, there's so many kind of like gray areas of like, okay, you're doing this, and if you have this, if you have cows, or how many wives do I need to marry, and what do I do, all these kinds of ifs and whens and what to do in the material world to try to live a regulated life so that you come to a point where you're like, okay, I understand this. I'm not the body. I'm not my mind. I'm actually an eternal spirit soul and servant of God. And what should I be doing in this life? Bhakti. I should be cultivating my loving relationship with God. And so to read more about that, and you know, Krishna makes it very clear in this he says, well, you know, the most ideal thing is to fix your mind upon me. That's Krishna consciousness, undeviated, right? That's a pure devotion of Krishna consciousness. But if you can't do that, which a lot of us can't do, then you follow the regulative principles of, you know, sadhana bhakti. Your spiritual master says these are the things you do. It's the beauty of the process because it's the goal and it's the means. So you can practice it, and even though you don't practice it really well, you have all kinds of attachments. You're practicing these regulative principles, and it's attractive to you because it's non-different than Krishna, right? So it is a purifying process by which you engage Krishna's names, and you offer your food to Krishna, and that is non-different as prasadam. And so you're doing all these things, and your faith is deepening because of that, and you're actually tasting an attraction to that. So you follow it, you can regulate that, and you can adjust that as you go along because you see, okay, this is the way I'm going down that path of imperishable faith to Krishna. So let me see if I can. So yeah, he goes on. He talks about, you know, it's okay if people are following this path of Jnana Yoga, which is this accumulation of knowledge and trying to launch themselves into the supreme. For that is a temporary path to hopefully get you to bhakti. And here he says, of course, one who worships me gives up all his activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, who has fixed his mind upon me, O Sanaprita, for him I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death, right? So just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of God, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. So then he lays out these kind of things of like the systems, you know, which was very wonderful to understand that even in the Vedic system there were all these regulations that were designed in a way that were giving you an opportunity to engage in something and still be spiritually purified, even though you weren't doing this pure Krishna consciousness. You would be engaging in things that would purify your mind and your heart. So he says, you know, O dear Arjuna, winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way you would develop a desire to attain me. So we were given by our spiritual teacher sadhana bhakti, or the practices he tells us. Chant Krishna's names, read the Bhagavad Gita, you know, do your japa or japa yoga with the beads, say Krishna's names, offer your food to Krishna. There's so many ways in this process, and we do that, and a lot of times maybe we don't feel like, we're like, oh, I'm going to do that thing, God. Or it's not really so sweet to do everything. It's not spontaneous. But we find that the more and more we practice it, our mind is becoming attracted to it, and we find that, oh, I want to do this nicer. I want to do this more sweet. It's so sweet to look at Krishna. Wow, I want to look at Krishna. I want to do that really nice. I want to make him something really nice with the food. And you're thinking with your mind, how can I serve Krishna nicer and nicer? And this is the beauty of this. So, but Krishna is telling Arjuna, you know, if you can't do all these things, there's a new condition. You can just go from even all the way down to this part of being, you know, the impersonal. You know, if you gather knowledge about your identity, that's better, but yet meditation trying to focus your mind on Krishna is better, right? So then he talks about the devotee and a person who's, you can read this chapter, but I'm just going to jump over to the last verse of this chapter, which is chapter 12, text 20. And he says, he who follows this imperishable path of devotional service. I love the words in this. It's so wonderful. Imperishable path of devotional service. It's imperishable. It's a path that's not like broken. It doesn't mean if like for some reason it's hidden, or maybe there's just one person in the whole world that somehow is going to disappear, or that it's gone, or that it will never show up again, or that people will forget it. No, it's an imperishable path. It is the actual means and the goal. So of this, it is Bhagavad Gita. It is the song of God. It's eternally ever existing. It's imperishable, and in this term it says a path, because it's so merciful that we, as living entities and servants of God, have forgotten our relationship with God and willingly decided, like the prodigal son that we are, that we can somehow be better. We can try to be our own perceived enjoyer in this material world. That always makes me crack up, because who's really enjoying in this world? It's pretty miserable, and we try to find this kind of path here, but yet we never find satisfaction in this happiness, in this illusion that, oh, I am this body. If I do these things with my body, then if I squeeze out the senses and enjoyment in this body, that somehow or another it'll all come together and it'll be great, and that just is amazing, that kind of illusion, because even if we were to get it all together, right? Even if we were all to get it together, we come to death and we find that it's all taken away. It's all sucked away. It's taken away at the time of death, and we lose everything. We lose our body, we lose everything we accumulated, we lose all of the friends and loved ones that we had, come into association with in this life, and then we have to do it all again, right? So Krishna is very merciful. Krishna is very merciful. He gives us the religiosity, path of religiosity to attempt to come back to him, to say, okay, this is not my home, and the imperishable path of devotional service to Krishna. It's a path, but it's a means, right? It is what people do in the spiritual world. It's what we did before. It's what we can do right now in this material world. We can be on this path, this imperishable path, and we completely engage ourselves with faith. And this faith is the understanding that and seeing when we're following the path that it is a real thing. It's the real deal. It's a real path to follow. It brings real joy. It brings real happiness. That kind of faith actually grows. It makes it so that your trust grows. It's a trust thing, right? So it's not this idea of like, well, I believe something without really actually seeing any kind of results. No, we have a little bit of faith. We have the faith. We start with, when we practice, we have a little bit of faith that, okay, I am enjoying this. I don't really know what it means, but I'm enjoying it, and so I trust it, And as it grows in our heart with this trust and with this faith, the faith grows too, and the faith becomes completely trusting and knowing that this is the imperishable path, and it is the right path to be on. So he says, he who follows this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engages himself with faith, making me the supreme goal, is very, very dear to me. So it's wonderful. And in the purport, Bhaktivedanta Swami says this wonderful thing. That's just another wonderful, beautiful phrase. In this chapter, the religion of eternal engagement It's a true religion of eternal engagement. It's what we were doing before. It's what we're doing now. It's what we can do, keep doing. But if we engage ourselves in trying to find our own happiness, turn away from God, turn our back on God, try to, I am my body. I can find happiness in this world. If I just believe it enough, it'll happen. No, it doesn't. I can live forever. They got these people who are like, I don't know, they're going to freeze themselves or whatever. So it's 5,000 years, and people are spending, this guy now, they got this billionaire who's like spending all this money to try to, eat the right diet, and the dude's going to die. Okay? It's like, they've all died, it's like, and even if you do, it's kind of like, who wants to keep living forever in this world of misery? It's just like, in an age of chaos, quarrel, and confusion, and complete nut jobs everywhere wherever you go. So it's not even really worth living in this material world unless you are following the imperishable path and teaching people about the imperishable path. Then it's really enjoyable, because then you're with Krishna. So it's the religion of eternal engagement. So it's happily enjoyed in engagement that's natural and full of joy. The explanation of the process of transcendental service for approaching the Supreme Lord is given. The process is very dear to the Lord, and he accepts a person who is engaged in such a process. Of course, it's enjoyable for everyone because it's about love. That's what the Bhagavad Gita is. It's a love song. It is this eternal engagement. This religion of eternal engagement is the Bhagavad Gita. It is this relationship that we have with God that we've chosen to forget. So Krishna is very, very pleased with the person who follows this, because it's about love. And when you love somebody, of course it's pleasing when people are saying, I want to be with you. Right? The question, who is better, one who is engaged in the path of impersonal Brahman, or one who is engaged in the personal service of the Supreme Personality of God? It was raised by Arjuna, and the Lord replied to him so explicitly that there is no doubt that the devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God is the best of all. Process of spiritual realization. So to recap, Krishna was saying that, the impersonal feature may be good for that temporary ladder to get you into the right place if you don't have a spiritual master teaching you about the imperishable path of devotional service. But without understanding that God is a person, there cannot, and you're thinking, well, God is this great white light and I'm part of that and I'm actually that thing. There is no eternal engagement. There is no relationship. There's nothing. You're just floating around in the ether, thinking that you're God. It's a lonely world up there. You're being all by yourself. I'm the king of all, right? But yet, very unhappy. So, but the engagement with the Supreme Person, of which this impersonal energy, personal light comes off of his body, is the highest form. It is the true path that we need to take in this life. In other words, so I'm reading more of Bhaktivedanta Swami. He says, in other words, in this chapter it is decided that through good association one develops attachment for pure devotional service, and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master, and from him begins to hear and chant and observe the regulative principles of devotional service with faith, attachment, and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. So it's very easy to miss all this stuff if you're trying to translate Sanskrit words in some kind of convoluted way of trying to see what exactly this whole thing means. When in the Bhagavad Gita itself, it's very clearly explained, even from the chapter 4, verse 34, where Krishna says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him and render service unto him. The self-realized soul, the spiritual master that you approach, who has had a spiritual master who was self-realized also in lineage all the way back to Krishna, can impart the knowledge because he has seen the truth. What does that mean? That means that he has taken this path of the imperishable. He says, the spiritual master says, this is the way you need to go, because that person's spiritual master said, this is the way you need to go. Here's my torchlight. I'm going to show you the way out of this cave, right? This is the way to go. And then he follows that to a T. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada followed his spiritual master's instructions by applying what he was teaching him, and then ultimately took his instructions and gave this wisdom to people in the West. If he had not done that, he would not have instructed my spiritual teacher, and my spiritual teacher would not have taught me about this, and I would not be talking. I don't know where I would be, but so this is the process. It's just a wonderful process, and we see it in the Bhagavad Gita. We see it in the Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the inquiry of the disciple, and the disciple is a bona fide disciple, right? It's a bona fide disciple because he's surrendered himself, and he's very intelligent. So it's not just like, okay, whatever you go. He actually takes it, he applies it, right? So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna, with Krishna, in the Srimad Bhagavatam with so many situations like Srila Vyasadeva and Narada Muni. If you read the Bhagavad, it's chock full of situations where a person approaches the spiritual master and inquires about spiritual knowledge, and that is what Srimad Bhagavatam is also, and that is what Bhagavad Gita is, and that is the way to understand Bhagavad Gita, by hearing it from a bona fide spiritual teacher with devotion and humility. So this path is recommended in this chapter. Therefore, there is no doubt that devotional service is the only absolute path for self-realization, for the attainment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. End game. That's it. That is the Bhagavad Gita. We are attaining what we have lost, what we have willingly given up, and we are re-attaining. It's not even like we are trying to get something. We are just trying to reinstate what we have thrown away so stupidly. And so this is a wonderful situation, and wonderful. So the Bhagavad Gita is a living scripture, and I would be my request that you take time every day to reflect upon these things in the Bhagavad Gita, and try to apply them in your life. So thank you very much. Let's chant some more. Thank you for all of you guys who tuned in today. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Jai Bhagavad Gita. Jai Shri Krishna. Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramam Sanamine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Vishtayate Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramam Sanamine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaurabhakta Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaurabhakta Haribol Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Haribol, Haribol Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Haribol, Haribol Nitai Gaur, Haribol, Nitai Gaur, Haribol. Very welcome. Haribol Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur. Nityananda, 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 Haribo, Jai Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gauranga, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gauranga, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gauranga, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gauranga, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening. Namaste.